Has Kabam been cheating the player base when it comes to terrible AI? We're going to investigate this. Since coming back from vacation, there's been this topic that Kabam have responded to when it comes to the questions around, has the AI changed in its behavior? And in order to look back into the topic, I had to go back in time. Literally go back to 2016, 2017, last 2 years, the input system and so many things to have a look. Has the AI changed, especially when you look at, say, the way the Act 1 content is, and compare that against where we are right now? Where are the enemy AI with throwing special attacks? Are they staying in a block for a long time? And if you just saw that footage on screen right now, that came from somebody that used to play the game quite a long time ago, and it's not the best use of skills, because you don't want to be blocking all the time. You want to be getting your intercepts in, but at the same time you want to be assured that the enemy AI is throwing special attacks, and you kind of go like that Maestro would be. And one thing that I haven't seen is that a lot of AI, regardless if it's in, say, Act 4 or it's in Labyrinth of Legends, is that over the years, especially previous years, the enemy seems to throw special attacks a little bit more frequently. I'm bringing it up to the current day and situation. There's going to be two things that pop up, two clear things I'm going to mention quite a bit throughout this video. Number one, the input system, which Kabam claim could have a knock-on effect with the changes and how that affects, say, AI interaction, how the AI will then map or kind of react to you as a player in your motions, in where you're swiping on the screen, the way your champion moves and things like that. And the second thing is AI profile, which I assume and as they say, the hardest fights mean that a certain AI profile will be similar. The way that, say, Crossbones is in Eternity of Pain, the same way that Blade has been in the last week in Eternity of Pain, that the way that they will interact with the nodes can, and also the way that the champion would move in certain elements and react, could be very different from, say, how AI is in the likes of Act 1, Act 2. And that's one topic I want to just kind of go over. So shout out to Super Brew, I think it is, that sent this through to me, and this is a video done by Modern Vintage Gamer. Now I'm not going to play its entirety, but I will just kind of TLDR it for you. It is a video that goes over the topic of how Mortal Kombat 2 cheats against you, the way that the AI was kind of tailored to be really, really difficult and frustrating and annoying, which meant that if you were playing in the arcade, you'll be kind of putting in loads of money in order to try and get past some of the more difficult AI, and it was incredibly frustrating for the player base at the time. The video is really good, especially because it puts into elements of these AI interactions from the way it's coded, and that's one key thing as well. The way that Kabam aren't really spending as much a huge time going into the coding element of how, say, champions, enemy AI champions that is, interact with you can be seen as a real problem, especially from the fun, enjoyment and the momentum of playing in any particular fight, whether it's Labyrinth of Legends, Eternity of Pain, Abyss of Legends, or any kind of content like Grandmaster Gauntlet. Speaking of the Grandmaster Gauntlet, I went back and watched some old footage from just other MCC YouTubers that have recorded stuff, and one thing that does come to mind for what I see is frequency of enemies throwing special attacks, which I just don't know if, say, these AI profiles are built for content specific against node specific, or, well, how they're built. As Kabam say there's no intentional changes to AI, but then kind of follow up by saying that we see the complaint that certain fights have different AI than others. For example, the Crossbones and Blade EOP fights, these both share the same AI profiles. So yes, well, that's confirmed. The AI is different, and obviously it does scale with the types of content that it's doing. But it does seem to be there's more things that play with that, and I think it just would be nice to know well, what has changed between 2014 and 2022, especially with the scale of the difficulty of content that this AI is changing in its behavior. Because I'm sure that Kabam have coded things in a certain way that would be, well, interacting in the most difficult things. They can't build the same type of AI that we see in Act 1 than it is in, Eternity of Pain or Grandmaster Gauntlet or at the end of Act 7. Here's a simple Act 3 fight right now where we're just going to go and try and just do some stuff. We'll do a parry there. Okay, parry's done, that's fine. Are we going to move out to the enemy? Yes, okay. That was a very kind of light and pathetic type of intercept right there. And I hit the champion. But if I was to do the same thing in Eternity of Pain, or I was doing any other content, I more than likely won't be able to achieve that. Especially when we look at things like hitboxes and the way that the enemy champion and his AI behavior is very reactive. A good example of this can be found like on screen. So this is basically from a good friend of Michael, Flack Diesel, who kind of like showcases something similar in ways, say, the hitbox works or the reaction, where that reaction from that AI in Act 3.2.6 was totally different to this blade in Eternity of Pain. He can just simply kind of go right here. This hitbox here would be like, okay, well, he swiped in first, or he was kind of pretty adamant that he got there first. You can see here the enemy AI or the enemy is static. And then it's like going in, he evades back out again, and then comes in again. And at that point there, with that kind of like that movement, and that fist that's right there on the stomach, that kind of like what we assume to be hitbox, is not a hit. And that is unfortunately him getting absolutely destroyed by that blade. That blade now is going to come down on him and is going to destroy him right there. So his input or his action is now determined to be an incorrect hit. It was him just kind of like opening up to be hit, and you can see then he gets KO'd. And what's the deal with that? Is that, number one, lag, battle lag, as I've had that personally, where I've been able to say dex or try to go for a block and it hasn't registered. Is that an input system based thing? Or is there something else going on that the AI is faster in reactive to the player? And before we get old tinfoil hat on this one, there's a really, as I said, like one of the big parts of this video is this particular evidence right here from Mortal Kombat 2. As we said, it is a great foundation to understand how the game would sort of cheat you as a player. And going back to that whole narrative of like, look, the further you go in the game, the more difficult it is, the more difficult and annoying and frustrating the AI is based on interaction, as well as how it's been coded. And before anyone comes at me and says, oh, well, difficult content's meant to be difficult, Rich, that's how we got the big kind of skill gap with this game. Yes, but also we need to consider something else. And I do agree, yes, things are meant to be challenge. It's a skill-based game. AI is meant to be taught in a way that's slightly unfair to the player, so therefore it means that the best play each and every time is meant to be that glorious thing. But the biggest problem that Marvel Contest of Champions has, and what Kabam put in place, is something called nodes, and the second thing is a timer. As we've learnt with stuff like Eternity of Pain Week 1 with Crossbones, as various other bits of content, including things like Alliance Wars, if you don't perform a certain action at a certain time, it can mean that you will either eat some damage back as a result, or causes an issue when it comes to timeout, and at the same time means that you could be losing resource unfairly because you are at the whim and the mercy of RNG. This is one of the reasons I keep on talking about damage, speed and momentum, in particular the momentum side of things. The length of time that a battle goes on can either be quite laborious, frustrating, or it can be really fun at the same time. Fun, Act 7 kind of fun, laborious, Abyss of Legends and stuff that takes absolutely forever, and that's 10 minutes of my life gone because of just continuous fights where you go, why? But in any case, enemy AI is still, regardless of what I say and regardless of what anyone else thinks, it's still something I strongly believe should be a constant open dialogue as to, well, how is this AI kind of like moving? How is it operating? What's its behavior? The behavior is very important. You don't want to like spend the entire fight waiting for special attacks to come out. When we do map 8, there's a Luke Cage fight that I do from time to time, and some of my colleagues in the Alliance have the same problem. They are waiting for a long time for enemies to throw special attacks. If we've got 5 minutes, and 2 minutes of that is wasted for a timer, it can be very, very frustrating. And that is something, again, that kind of plays into this. Enemy AI is something that always should be looked into. Kabam should always be going back to look at the coding of it, and also looking at how it interacts, and also how players feel about its performance. Inputs, that's one key element of the game. The second key element of this game is how an enemy moves at you, because it's not PvP, it's not live PvP, it's PvE. And that's something that's very important that needs to be always addressed. What is the AI doing? And are people happy with the way it's moving? One thing that really baffles me is the development time at Kabam. Now, there might be some things going on that I don't know about that go on at Kabam, but the development time between building something and then having it out for either beta or having it out for kind of full release is such a lengthy period that a lot of time it's just very, well, surprising, especially for the amount of money that Kabam makes or the game gets. And, you know, I don't know, Netmarble, how that works. But you kind of feel like, is this a resourcing issue that this stuff? Is it kind of like a management issue, a leadership issue, that this can't be kind of worked on in a higher pace type of coverage? It does always baffle me, especially when we see stuff like changing the AI is a massive undertaking and takes a very long time to do, but you kind of think this is a core element of the game that should be constantly reworked, the way that other mobile games have a very high pace and high work environment. You look at Marvel Future Revolution, you look at Marvel Future Fight, which kind of like does a lot more work and a lot more quicker frequency. But, you know, that could be a case that the game Marvel Future Fight or these other games, the systems are a lot more easier to work with, and Kabam's system with Marvel Contest takes a lot longer. I don't know, I think I'm just trying to find an excuse right here. Kabam say that this particular situation, bug potentially, is likely a symptom of the input system change and should be reported as such. So I don't know, really, looking at this, like there's a little bit of kind of like pass the buck type problem in that Kabam they feel quite reluctant to kind of look into this a bit more than it is. They're unsure as to whether this is a result of the input issues. Is it players not liking the fact that the AI profile is to be that kind of like, it's meant to be difficult, so it is what it is. So there's a lot of things that are kind of going on in the mix, but I definitely feel that Kabam should be interested in what players have got to say when it comes to AI behavior. If you've been playing for 7 to nearly 8 years, as I've been playing, as many other players have, you'll definitely want to like know that the game is being cared for. Whether or not you are tapping on the screen or relying on an enemy to throw a special attack after 2 minutes on a timer on a node that could potentially degen you to death, then hey, you would like to know that somebody's taking your consideration very carefully. I also think Kabam should not delete any of the posts that come up with just responses to the current situation of AI. Yes, there should be a better way of reporting this, especially input system and AI movements. Two key factors to this game. You play against an enemy champion that moves at you in different types of ways based on its behavior, based on its profile, as we see. But at the same time, you want to input on your screen something that when you move, hey, your champion moves. When it throws something, it throws something. That's what you want. And you need those two things to coexist. And they should always be constantly looked at, tweaked and improved with player suggestions in mind. So yeah, more dialogue needs to be on this particular situation, and definitely more transparency would be nice. But in any case, I don't want to go too tinfoil hat with this. I definitely, as I said, think that Kabam should be always looking into taking in player suggestions. This would make the game just like so much better, is taking in what players have to say, their feedback in different areas. You know, some of the sanctums are good, but at the same time, they're nothing if they're not acted on. And that's the key thing. Act on some of these players' interests, requests, responses. I'm not saying this whole situation is a tinfoil hat job. I just think at times there is legitimate cause in certain areas to investigate things a bit more and spend some time to do it, because it just looks like at times things aren't being developed or looked into, and maybe that's down to a smaller Kabam team dealing with this. A particular reason why they can't do this is a leadership issue, a management issue. I don't know, but it just would be nice to see some of these key areas, spend a bit of time with players, a little beta here and there, just to make people invested and interested in this game going forward. The players have a bit of a say. But what's your thoughts on this particular subject? Put it in the comment section down below. How do you feel about it? In any case, thank you very much for watching. Check out some of the links in the description down below, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that will be. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.